Well, hello everybody out there, and welcome to another episode of Movie Passion. And yeah, since there is apparently a new Twisters movie coming out, I thought, hey, let's revisit the original from 1996 and talk a little bit about it. And that's what I want to do in this video. So, yeah, let's take a closer look at Twister with Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. First of all, what is this movie all about? Well, the movie is basically about this guy, Bill, who used to be a storm chaser but is now a weatherman, and he wants to get remarried. He wants to get married to Melissa, but in order to get remarried, he needs the signed divorce papers from his ex wife, Jo. And that's why they go and visit Jo in order to get those divorce papers. And Jo is apparently also a storm chaser. Jo basically became a storm chaser because her father got killed by a twister. And yeah, at this point, let's just talk a little bit about the death of Jo's father because, in my opinion, this death was really stupid and also kind of really unnecessary because there was this big twister and Jo and her parents were hiding in this bunker or storm cellar or whatever you might call it. But then the twister got so close that it was about to rip away the door. So Jo's father decided to try to keep this door shut, but he failed. The twister just ripped away the door and also carried away Jo's father. So that's how he died. But the problem is this death was totally stupid and unnecessary because even with the door gone, Jo and her mother obviously survived. So that door wasn't even that necessary for their survival. So it was actually a pretty stupid thing to risk your life for something that wasn't really important for your survival. And it's just one out of three examples in the entire movie, or it's one of three deaths in the movie where people basically just die because of poor decision making. But yeah, that death of her father was basically the beginning of Jo's crutch against twisters, and it inspired her to become a storm chaser and study twisters in order to help people. But for some reason, Jo, quote unquote, forgot to sign one page in those divorce papers, and then they were off hunting another twister, so she again forgot to sign that page. And this is why Bill and Melissa now have to drive along with Jo and go on those storm chases, which over the course of the movie basically brings Bill and Jo closer together. And that's when they realize that they still love each other and that Bill and Melissa aren't really going to have a future. So there is that. But basically, the main reason why they are still chasing twisters is because of an invention from Bill and Jo. And this invention is called Dorothy, just like Dorothy from the movie Wizard of Oz. And this invention, by the way, which is basically kind of like a big barrel with hundreds of little sensors inside that supposed to get sucked up by the twister and then measure all various different things and give you vital data and informations about the twister. This is basically a concept that really existed in real life. There was this thing called Toto, which was apparently the name of Dorothy's dog in the movie The Wizard of Oz. But yeah, it's something that actually really existed. So yeah, their idea is to get this thing into the twister and gather all this information. But then there is kind of like the one antagonist in this movie, which is another storm chaser named Jonas. And Jonas basically kind of stole this Dorothy concept, and he built his own quote unquote Dorothy named Dot 3. And Joe and especially Bill are not really that happy about that. So Bill even physically attacks Jonas because Jonas stole the concept. He stole Bill's idea. But here's the thing. If Bill didn't want anybody to steal this idea, why didn't he just patent it? Seriously. I mean, yes, I know getting a patent for something costs money, but Bill obviously has money. I mean, he had enough money to buy a brand new pickup truck. So if you have that kind of money, why didn't you just invest that money to patent your idea? So seriously, you can't get mad at somebody for stealing your idea if you never bothered to patent your idea. Seriously. I mean, Bill is criticizing Jonas for getting a lot of corporate sponsors, and he claims that he's in it for the money and not for the science. And he also criticizes Jonas for not having, he's criticizing Jonas for not having an instinct or whatever. But here's the thing, if Bill would only care about the science and if he would do all of that simply just to help people, why is he so angry at Jonas for stealing his idea? Apparently, it's also very important for Bill to get all the credit for his own idea. So, yeah, how is that so much different from Jonas, who does it all for the money? Because let's face it, the motivation, in the end, your motivation doesn't matter. What matters is the scientific data and all the informations that you can gather that end up helping people. Your motivation basically doesn't matter at this point. It doesn't matter how or why you got the information and all this scientific data. You know, it's kind of like a double standard or whatever you call it. It just doesn't really make that much sense. And then yeah, later in the movie, Joe and Bill, they also basically have some kind of a change of heart where they realize, okay, Jonas has a better position, he has a better chance to get this thing up, but only if he puts this thing or if he fixed that thing to the ground because it's too light. And they decided to share this information because in the end they realize, you know, that the scientific data is what really matters. But yeah, it's kind of stupid that they attacked Jonas only because he's so full of himself. And yeah, the reason why he's so full of himself is also basically the reason why he got killed. Because yeah, he decided to ignore all the warnings from Bill and Joe. So yeah, his own ignorance basically killed him and his driver. So again, like I said, 2 deaths because of poor decision making. So at this point, let's just talk a little bit about Dorothy and the whole concept. So throughout the entire movie, they try to get Dorothy into the twister. Now, first of all, I don't really understand why the entire apparatus needs to get sucked into the twister. I mean, isn't it enough if all those sensors would be inside the twister? But yeah, maybe they thought that the sensors would be too light and therefore they need to be inside something that is a little bit more heavy. But as it turns out, Dorothy is also too light, and they claim that Dorothy is always getting blown away by the twister before the twister has the chance to suck her up, which is kind of weird that all those experts, especially Dusty, who keeps talking about the suck zone, that they didn't know how heavy an object needs to be in order to get sucked up by the twister instead of just getting blown away. And by the way, I also don't know if it would help if they would have attached maybe some kind of a parachute to Dorothy, or if this would cause Dorothy to just get sucked up or lifted up, but it wouldn't get really inside the twister. I don't know. But yeah, the thing is, they claim that Dorothy is too light and that she gets blown away by the twister, or that it gets blown away by the twister instead of sucked up. But here's the thing, we never see that in the movie. Yes, there is this one scene where Dorothy is basically getting pushed around on the street, but yeah, we never really see that she's getting blown away instead of getting sucked up, because Dorothy 2 and 3, they always just get knocked over by various different objects, like a power pole or a flying tree. The thing is this, why did they design Dorothy so that you have to do a whole bunch of things in order to get Dorothy ready? Why not just design the thing so that you only have to push one button and then it's ready? If that would have been the case, the first Dorothy already would have been a success, because she was heavy enough, because she was strapped to the twister, she was strapped to Joe's truck, and she flew. So yeah, poor design was basically the reason why the first Dorothy wasn't a success already. Which basically brings us to the end of the movie, where for some strange reason they all of a sudden decide to modify the sensors and attach little windmills or little propellers onto the sensors. What's that all about? Throughout the entire movie, they always told us that Dorothy, like the entire apparatus would be too light. But now all of a sudden they act as if the sensors would be the problem. Seriously, if the whole apparatus would get sucked up by the twister, wouldn't also all the sensors be automatically inside the twister? I mean, wasn't that the whole idea? Why did they all of a sudden conclude that they also have to modify the sensors? I just don't understand that. It just doesn't make any sense. They basically already came up with a plan to get Dorothy inside the twister by strapping her on the back of of Bill's truck and driving the truck directly into the twister. So why did they think, okay, but now first we also have to modify the sensors too? Why is that all of a sudden a problem? And by the way, I'm not an expert when it comes to the laws of physics or aerodynamics and things like that, but this doesn't really work, right? It's stupid. It doesn't work, no matter if those little propellers are loose so that the propellers can spin, or if they are fixed so that the entire sensor needs to spin, but it just doesn't work, right? Because this only works if they have the chance to spin, and this way they are basically getting kind of quote unquote propelled upward. But the problem is, at the beginning, those sensors are all inside Dorothy. So they are basically all lying on top of each other in a big pile. How should they start spinning at this point, even if there would be a lot of wind? It just doesn't work. Those things can really only start spinning once they are already up in the air. And if they manage to get up into the air without spinning, it would basically prove that you didn't really need those propellers to get those sensors up into the air. It just seems like such a stupid concept, right? Plus, you have a lot of sharp edges and stuff like this. So if those things are all just laying in a big pile, isn't there also the chance or the problem that maybe some of those propellers are getting hooked into one another, and that therefore there are sensors that are basically being stuck together? Didn't you just add another problem? I don't know, it just seems like something that doesn't really work. I think if they would have maybe changed the design so that instead of making little propellers, I think it would have been better if they would have made some kind of little aluminum, I don't know, umbrellas or something like this, so that the wind can actually really carry those things upward without those things needing to spin. I don't know, but it just seems dumb, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just doesn't seem like something that could work. So, aside from that, are there any other problems with the movie? Well, one thing that always bugged me when I watched this movie was the way how the explosions behave. You know, the fact that the explosions or the resulting fireball never really gets affected by all the wind, even if the explosion happens right next to the twister. You know, this is definitely something that they did a lot better in the Twisters movie, but yeah, that's probably the only thing that's going to be better, the visual or special effects. But I'm pretty sure that the new Twisters movie isn't going to be as good as the original because from what I've seen in the trailer, it looks like one of those movies where you basically just don't really care about the characters or what they do or if something happens to them. I don't know. It just, the characters just don't really seem likable. But maybe it's still going to be a big success, just like those weird Jurassic World movies are a big success, even though they are nowhere near as good as the original Jurassic Park movie. So, another thing that I have to criticize about this movie is the continuity. You know, there are definitely some really obvious continuity errors. So, for example, when they make their first stop at the diner, Bill is outside looking at the sky, and the sky is like totally green, and it also gets like a little bit darker. And then they decided to move on, and for some reason, in the next scene, it looks like the sky is a lot more clear, and it looks like the sun is shining again. So it's very unlikely that the weather or that the sky would change that much in a matter of just, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds. You know, it's not really that good. And the thing that always bugged me the most, maybe the thing that was bugging me probably even more than the thing with the explosions, was that one scene where all those tractors and harvesters were falling onto the street and Bill and Joe had to avoid them. So there is this one scene where there is this long arm. I don't know what those things are called, but there's this long thing sticking out from one of those harvesters, and we can see that this thing clearly smashed in the windshield on the passenger side of the truck. You know, we could clearly see that this thing went through the windshield. But for some reason, 1 second later, the windshield is again totally fine. I really don't know why they decided to use that scene. Seriously, was this like one of those things where they only had one take, where they could only do it once, and even if it wasn't perfect, they still had to use it? I don't know, but this always bugged me, you know, like, hey, the windshield clearly got shattered. So why did you leave that in? I don't know. So what else? Then there is apparently the fact that they did actually talk to a lot of scientists and storm experts, and they even went to some chases with some storm chasers. So in a way, they tried to get as much information as possible to make this movie and the tornadoes or twisters as realistic as possible and, you know, be kind of like scientifically accurate. But then they made some really stupid decisions. For example, some experts have been criticizing the way how people in this movie took shelter, that it's usually not really safe what they do, especially not the first time when Joe and Bill are hiding underneath this wooden bridge, you know, because a bridge like that definitely doesn't give you any protection when there is a twister coming at you. But on the other hand, I mean, what should they do at this point? They couldn't use the car to just drive away because, they couldn't get out of there, and they couldn't stay inside the truck because, yeah, the truck apparently got sucked up by the twister. So what other option did they have? I mean, they could have tried to outrun the twister. I mean, this is something that they did later in the movie with a much bigger twister, but yeah, I don't know what else they could have done. It's just one of those things. If you run out of options, what can you do? But the one thing that I really also don't like about this movie, I mean, like I said, they tried to make everything as accurate or as realistic as possible. But then for some reason, they decided to add those weird, unrealistic sounds to those twisters to make those twisters, seem kind of like dangerous animals of some sorts. I mean, throughout the entire movie, you can hear that whenever there is a twister, there is also this weird, dark growling sound, as if the twister is a growling animal or something like this. And then there are also those two water twisters that they call sisters. And, instead of a deep growling sound, they decided, no, those are sisters, which means we need some kind of a high-pitched sound at this point to make those twisters sound like sirens or, female of some sort. So yeah, you have this weird high screeching sound that kind of like sounds wild birds or sirens or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, adding unrealistic sound effects to give the twisters some kind of character or to make the twisters, kind of like living entities or something like that. I mean, it fits to the thing that Joe thinks about twisters, that twisters are, acting as if they have some kind of a conscience, and that twisters sometimes actively hunt people because that's what she felt like, that twisters have been hunting her. It's maybe something that is supposed to make the movie more realistic or more interesting, but at the same time, it made everything a little bit more unrealistic. So those are probably the only things that I have to criticize about this movie, but everything else about this movie is really great. I mean, the soundtrack is really great, and also the score is really great. I really love that. And another thing that I really liked, another scene that I really liked in this movie, that was the scene in this drive-in movie theater. So apparently the movie that they were watching was The Shining. And, I really like the fact that the movie makers decided to say, okay, so in the movie The Shining, Jack is the antagonist. He's the one who is trying to kill his family. But in the reality, or in the Twister reality, the Twister is the antagonist. He's the one who is trying to kill you and your family. And I really love that scene where the Twister starts ripping off chunks of the movie screen at the same time where Jack is using the axe to smash in the door to get to his wife. And yeah, it's so great that the twister is basically bursting through the movie screen right at the same moment where Jack is putting his face through the door. And the only thing, the only thing that would have made this scene even better and basically absolutely perfect would have been if we would have been able to hear the sound from the movie, from the Shining movie. That we could hear this famous "Here's Johnny" quote. That would have been kind of like the icing on the cake, because it would be almost as if the twister would say that line as he's smashing through the movie screen. I mean, it is nice that for a brief moment we can see Jack Nicholson's crazy face projected basically onto the twister. Maybe they didn't do it, the thing with the "here's Johnny" quote, because it would have been a little bit too obvious, too much on the nose, so to say. But to me, it would have made the scene really perfect. But yeah, you can't have everything, apparently. But it was still a really nice and kind of artsy scene in a way. And I really like that. And the cast and crew is also absolutely brilliant. I mean, when it comes to Joe's team, when it comes to those storm chasers, yes, maybe many of them don't really have this many things to do, or they don't really have more than one or two lines throughout the entire movie, but they are still all very, very likable. You still somehow care for those characters, even if you don't really know that much about them. So the casting is really, really good in this movie. And yeah, there is also this emotional factor. First of all, the way how Joe still hates Twisters because they killed her father. And then, of course, the whole thing with Aunt Mag. And, when they drive back to rescue Aunt Mag, they see all those destroyed houses. And then they also see this family, which immediately reminded Joe of her family when she was still a little girl. You have those tearjerker moments in this movie that is something that I also really like, this emotional factor, which I think the new movie is also going to lack. I mean, I've only seen the trailer, but yeah, I don't think that the new movie is going to be anywhere near as good as the old one. Maybe the effects are going to be better, maybe there is a lot more action, but yeah, I think the emotional factor isn't going to be that well, and there aren't really going to be this many likable characters, if any at all. Yeah, I mean, there is also like this little humor in this movie, in the original one. The one scene where the cow is getting blown across the street, where they say, "Hey, a cow." "Oh, another cow." "No, I think it's the same one." And while we are on the subject of funny moments, there are probably a lot of people that liked this moment where this house is getting blown onto the street and they have to basically drive through the entire house. Now, as you probably know, I live in Germany, and German houses are built completely different compared to houses in the US. So, as a German, if you watch this movie and you watch this scene where the house is getting blown onto the street, you just sit there shaking your head thinking, only in America could something like this happen, because that's just the way it is. American houses, they are built to look good, but they are still built very cheaply, with wooden planks and dry walls and things like this, unlike German houses that are made with real concrete and brick walls and things like this. And in Germany, it wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't be possible to just punch a hole into the wall. Something like this just wouldn't happen. Yeah, but other than that, I do have to say it is still a very great movie, probably the best Twister movie out there. I know there's other Twister movies. There's also, what was this movie called? Storm Hunters. I'm not sure if I'm going to review this movie too. I'm not sure. But yeah, Twister is definitely a really great movie, even though it has some flaws. But come on, what movies don't have flaws? Doesn't mean that the movie isn't entertaining, but I don't know how entertaining the new Twisters movie is going to be. To me, when I compare old movies to new movies, it feels kind of like comparing old WWF wrestling with new WWE wrestling. I mean, I used to love wrestling when I was a kid. but that was still the WWF era, with all the weird gimmicks and all that kind of stuff. But when I watch today's wrestling, I just don't enjoy it because the wrestlers are just not likable. They are just not charismatic at all. I don't like any of them. And if I don't like the wrestlers, I can't really enjoy watching them. So I don't know what it is, if it's their look or the fact that they don't really have those kind of weird gimmicks from back then, or if it's the fact that they have a completely different attitude, or I don't know what it is. But I can still watch and enjoy old WWF matches, but I just don't enjoy the new stuff. It's just terrible. It's painful to watch. But yeah, in a certain way that it kind of feels like the same thing with movies, The characters, the actors, sometimes they're just not as charismatic. I don't know why, I don't know what it is, but yeah, things change. And maybe movies nowadays they are made for a different generation that likes different things. Maybe that's the reason why I don't like it that much. I don't know. But yeah, I really like Twister. We're going to see if Twisters is going to be a big success or a big flop. I don't know. But yeah, that's it. I hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next one. Bye!